I love the Dead Space series, and I've been clamoring for more ever since the third game was released in 2013. Unfortunately, the trilogy ended rather abruptly, with the final DLC and the closing of Visceral Games in 2017. I was really bummed about this, but I had to resign myself to the fact that Dead Space had come and gone. Years would pass, and then the rumors started. I began to hear whispers of a reboot or remake of the series. At the time, I chalked this up to misinformed speculation and moved on with my life.
Don't give me hope.
Then we got confirmation from EA, and I was still in doubt until we got the first trailer. Finally, it was confirmed that gamers would get the chance to experience the first Dead Space with a remake brought to you by the studio that made Star Wars Squadrons.
Perfection.
I picked that shit up day one and played through it very quickly, which led me to the conclusion I needed to go back and play the original again. Needless to say, I've had a lot of Dead Space in my life these last couple of weeks, and I'm so excited to talk about both versions. I'll be giving my thoughts during this video, and I'll do my best to compare their differences without giving major spoilers away. With that, let's head back to the USG Ishimura and take a look at the story.
On the docking. Let's go.
We're losing control. Fuck! We're off course! Daniel!
Guidance system override isn't responding.
Both games open largely the same, with the main playable character Isaac Clarke traveling with a repair crew to the USG Ishimura. Dead Space takes place in the year 2508, and humanity has managed to expand throughout the universe. Earth's inhabitants were dangerously low on resources until private companies started heavily mining other worlds for their resources using giant planet-cracking ships, with the Ishimura being the first. The crew of the Ishimura was conducting a mining operation when the ship went dark, so Isaac and his crewmates were sent to see what all the fuss is about. If you haven't guessed by the title of the game, some horrible things are waiting for Isaac upon their arrival, and Isaac is personally invested in this mission because his girlfriend was on the ship working as a doctor. Players will be taken on a twisted journey involving monsters, government cover-ups, mental health, and a cult-like religion. As I said, both games follow similar story beats, but the remake feels more fleshed out with its narrative. Isaac now has a speaking role instead of the silent demeanor he portrayed in the original game, and side characters have been fleshed out more as well. People who were regulated to audio logs in the original game now have full-blown roles in the story, and characters who had minor roles before have now been brought to the forefront to make the game world feel more alive.
Pun intended.
The developers went further with this by adding more logs and areas to expand on what happened aboard the Ishimura before your arrival. This is, of course, a positive design change from the original, but that doesn't mean the remake does everything better regarding the story. Dead Space 08 is a much more subtle experience compared to the remake. With Isaac not speaking, the player is forced to draw conclusions about what happened on the ship and how far Isaac has descended into madness. The remake sometimes goes as far to spell these things out, which is appreciated for world building, but I can't say I didn't miss the self-imposed doubt I experienced in the original version. These differences aren't something I can point at and definitively say one is better than the other. They're more of a preferential choice, which will be a recurring theme in this video. The team over at Motive did an excellent job at making sure that any change implemented did not compromise the overall destination of the original game's story, and this practice carried over to the gameplay. I'd be hard-pressed to ask for more out of a remake, so let's expand on that by taking a look at exactly what we'll be doing in both versions.
Entering vacuum.
The gameplay loop of Dead Space is the same in both games. Isaac is tasked with an objective in a specific part of the ship, and it's his job to get himself there while separating all the limbs from a large variety of enemies along the way.
Just a flesh wound.
The main difference between the two's gameplay boils down to how players navigate and how enemies behave in combat. The original makes players feel stronger than they do in the remake. I played both on hard difficulty and noticed that weapons pack more of a punch in Dead Space 08. And while enemies die easier in the OG version, the player still isn't safe. Hordes of enemies were sent at me for some sections of the game, and while there is an abundance of ammo, if you're not managing it correctly, this does not prevent the player from getting overwhelmed. Dead Space 23, on the other hand, has a gameplay style similar to Resident Evil 2's remake. Enemies are harder to kill, and I was hurting on ammo most of the time. Luckily, I felt like I was pursued less in this game opposed to the original, otherwise this gameplay may have felt overcooked.
Stick a fork in me, Jerry. I'm done.
Like I said earlier, the differences continue with the remake when it comes to navigating the Ishimura. Before, Dead Space was broken up into sections where players would complete an area and then return to the tram system to be put into the next level via a loading screen. This has been changed in the remake to give players full reign of the ship. The only time you'll see a loading screen in the remake is when you die, which is a remarkable change. When playing the original, I never truly grasped where each area of the ship was located, and it was interesting to see where everything was in relation to each other. Before, I saw each part of the Ishimura as just a singular level, and it was refreshing to have some legroom during my playthrough.
A little bit of extra leg.
Regarding the weapons themselves, I felt more of a mixed bag when it came to the changes Motive made. They changed some of the ways the weapons behave using their primary and secondary fire. For example, the pulse gun's secondary fire used to be a spinning area attack, while in the remake the player can fire a grenade. Also, some weapons that felt extremely useful and powerful from the jump in the original now feel useless until upgraded in the remake. This was probably done for balancing, but I have to say it's one of the few changes I didn't love in Dead Space 23.
Like, it's not the vibe. Stop!
Players still find notes to upgrade their weapons at benches, but the two versions have a critical difference. Both have upgrade trees, but Dead Space 08 uses hollow slots in the tree that need to be filled before getting to the different stat bonuses, such as damage, ammo capacity, etc. Dead Space 23 has stat upgrades available in every slot, but now the player has to find upgrades to unlock the branches in the tree. This change also led to a tweak in the locked doors that are available to players. When opening one of these doors in the original, players must pay a node to gain access. In the remake, the player will be granted security clearance as they progress through the game, which means the only thing keeping Isaac from those goodies behind each of those doors is some backtracking.
Terrific.
The changes in the gameplay feel like they were made to fit a more modern playstyle because gaming as a whole has moved on from late 2000s jank. The original version's field of view always felt slightly higher than it should be, in my opinion, and Isaac sometimes moved more like a UPS truck than a person. Oh, and they fixed the zero-G. Thank God they fixed the zero-G. Motive took it upon themselves to change the zero-gravity sections to be more in line with what we saw in Dead Space 2 and 3, where the players will free float opposed to leaping around like an asshole, which really helps, especially when I hit the Z-ball court, because
ball is life.
I can't fault the movement too much though, because Dead Space 08 was made with the same engine that was designed for Tiger Woods PGA. Yes, that's 100% true, and having that context makes me understand the original developers basically performed black magic when making Dead Space 08. For fuck's sake, the engine was designed for this purpose.
It's in the rough, but this could be much worse.
Well, not the best result here.
All the remaining mechanics are still mostly the same. Players will be spending credits at the store for resources, using stasis on foes, throwing objects, and peeing yourself trying to determine if an enemy is actually dead or not. Closing out the gameplay section, I'd like to restate that neither version is necessarily better than the other when it comes to how they play. Just like how the story is presented, it all comes down to personal preference, and I would understand picking either of them when it comes to what is preferred. I can't say this about the presentation, though.
Shit like that's above my pay grade. Look, we can get into it later. You'll need a way down to those junction boxes. You can turn the atrium elevators back on from security. You'll have full access. I found a CEC executive key card. I'll upgrade your clearance.
If you made it this far, you might assume I'm going to cop out and say both games are great, and it just comes down to what you prefer. Well, you would be
Wrong. It's just like wrong. It's just wrong.
So when we have a
not
party,
true.
I only feel that way about the story and gameplay. I'm only partially copping out. But no, seriously, it's obvious. Dead Space has undergone a massive visual upgrade with the remake. The original game was visually stunning for its day, but it shows its age in 2023. While lighting and shadows still look great, character models are basic as hell for today's standards. And despite the game being one of the goriest things you're ever going to experience, some of the textures look too clean and smooth for my eyes. Dead Space 23 not only fixes this, but also manages to be one of the prettiest games I've played in a while. The lighting in the remake is immersive and creates an unsettling atmosphere of dread. The Ishimura's look now matches the havoc that preceded your arrival. Blood is realistically smeared on the environment, and if you get too close for comfort, the player can expect that blood to get smeared on Isaac's armor as well. This highlights the detailed character model work. Most of the characters have been modeled after their respective voice actors, and it's approaching Uncanny Valley. Wow. And yes, the team over at Motive knew that the suit animation was crucial for the game to succeed.
The good stuff.
Jumping over to the sound design, I'd like to talk about the performances seen in both games. The original Dead Space had some great performances, and while I was sad to see most of them replaced, I must say the new cast is doing a great job, including the glorious return of Gunnar Wright as Isaac Clarke. When I heard Isaac was going to speak in the remake, the first question I had was who was going to voice him. I've always thought that the original guy was the only choice, and I'm glad to see the developers came to the same conclusion.
Yes! Yes, Gaga, you look so good! Oh my god, yes!
I'd also be lying if I said I wasn't excited to see the one-sided conversations with Isaac get the boot. It was awkward as hell to have menacing characters like Mercer threaten Isaac just to have him basically ignore them.
Yes, Mr. Clarke, and after this you will have nothing. So what do you think of that? Mr. Clarke? Wow. What a prick.
The excellent sound design doesn't stop with the voice acting either. Dead Space's atmosphere wouldn't be complete without blood-chilling sound effects. The original game's sound design still holds up to modern standards. The ship has this hollow ambience that echoes through your speakers, and there's these ominous voices that give you goosebumps. So the developers for the remake had the perfect jumping-off point. They improved on this by having more prominent stereo sound effects, so you'll catch yourself checking behind you when you hear those unmistakable sounds. The attention to detail on display here is downright impressive, and the small things I never knew could improve presentation pop up all the time. For example, if Isaac's health is in the red, he will sound injured in every conversation until he replenishes his health.
It can't get us home.
Wait, maybe it can. If the Valor Singularity Core is okay, I could salvage it, install it on that shuttle. We're fucking out of here.
In my opinion, these finer details are what make a game feel next-gen. We've reached a point in video game visuals where almost everything looks pretty, so developers should focus on smaller things like this to make the world feel organic. The game also runs well on console along with PC and has since launch, unlike another title. Not naming any names here. God, they didn't even include a New Game Plus. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Dead Space. Both versions are great, and it's tough to pin down which one I like better because they are very similar but have slight variations that change the feeling of the gameplay and story. So I'd have to say I like them both. I enjoyed my playthrough of the games equally, and when I came to this conclusion, I was left with the thought that it does not matter which one is technically better. We now have two great games. Great for different reasons, but great nonetheless. When it comes to video games getting remakes, this is the best outcome possible, and we could all be so lucky to see our favorite games brought back to life in this way. I'm going to close this one out by telling you this. Dead Space is back, and it's made us whole.